The call came at 2:08 a.m., not ringing, buzzing. That low, insistent vibration that crawls across the nightstand like something alive, rattling against a stack of envelopes I'd been meaning to open for months. Utility bills, insurance notices, paperwork that quietly decides your future while you're busy keeping everyone else afloat. The furnace kicked on, then off, like it couldn't decide whether the house was worth warming. February pressed hard against the windows, the kind of cold that makes the floor sting through your socks and reminds you exactly how old your bones are. The name on the screen stopped my breath. My wife. She wasn't in bed. Again. I stared at her name longer than I should have. Long enough for a thought to surface that I didn't want to admit. If she was calling me at this hour, it wasn't because she missed me. I answered anyway. Thank God, she said. Too fast. Too sharp. Breathless in a way that wasn't panic so much as performance. You picked up. I didn't know what else to do. The words hit before my mind had caught up. He's in the hospital. I sat up. The other side of the mattress was cold, untouched, empty in that familiar way that no longer came with an explanation. What happened? I asked. They won't help him unless we pay the deposit, she said, the sentence tumbling over itself like she'd rehearsed it too many times. They're saying he could be in unbearable pain all night if we don't act right now. In the background, I heard sounds that wanted to be medical. The hum of fluorescent lights, the squeak of wheels on tile, a distant voice saying something official sounding, followed by a cough that felt carefully placed. How much? I asked. There it was. The pause. Just long enough. $24,000. The number landed heavy, but not shocking. What shocked me was how quickly my body reacted, how my legs swung out of bed before my mind had finished processing, how my hand was already reaching for the banking app like muscle memory. Fix it. Handle it. Be the man who solves the problem. I stood barefoot on the cold floor, staring at the dark outline of the dresser we'd bought back when forever still felt like a promise instead of a threat. 24,000, I repeated. Yes, tonight. I swallowed. He wasn't my son. Not legally, not biologically. He was hers, from before me. When I met him, he was a lanky, defiant teenager with eyes that never quite met yours, already convinced the world owed him something it had no intention of paying. I taught him how to throw a baseball behind this same house, how to parallel park in an empty grocery lot on Sunday mornings. I showed up. Over and over. I never adopted him. She always said there would be time. There never was. Where are you? I asked. With him, she said quickly. I'm right here. Which hospital? Another pause. This one sharper. Out west, she said. Then too fast. It doesn't matter. They all work the same. It mattered. I walked to the window and pulled the curtain aside. Snow sat in dirty piles along the curb, glowing orange under the streetlight. My truck was parked in the driveway, salt-stained and paid off. Everything about my life was here solid, boring, earned. Whatever she was describing was hundreds of miles away. My accounts are locked, she continued. Cards are frozen. I tried everything. I wouldn't ask you if there were any other way. I swear I'll pay you back Monday. Why are they frozen? I asked. Silence. Then her voice softened. That familiar tone she used when she wanted me to stop thinking and start complying. Because everything is happening at once, she said. And he's crying. He keeps asking for you. Found. There it was. The hook. That word you wrapped around my chest like wire. For years that had been enough. I felt the old reflex flare. The urge to prove I was good, dependable, necessary. The urge to sacrifice now so nobody could accuse me later of not caring enough. And then something cold slid in behind it. She kept saying my son, not our son. I remembered another call. Different year. Same hour. Same panic. She'd sworn he needed money for a medical emergency. I'd sent it without hesitation. A week later, I'd seen photos online. Champagne, neon lights, a smile that didn't belong to a man recovering from anything. I'd confronted her. She cried. I apologized. That was the rhythm of my life. I paid, then I apologized. What happened to him? I asked. A fight, she said immediately. He got jumped. Where? A beat. At a casino. The word tightened something deep in my gut. He loved casinos. Said they relaxed him. Said he had a system. I'd heard that word from men at work who never seemed to make it to payday. Call his father, I said. The line went dead quiet. What? She snapped. Call his real father, I repeated. My voice surprised me. Calm. Steady. Like something had finally locked into place. I'm not doing this anymore. That man is not part of our lives, she shot back. And I am? I asked. Because right now, you're talking to me like I'm a credit limit. How can you say that when he's suffering? She screamed. How can you demand $24,000 in the middle of the night, I said, and refuse to tell me where you even are? If you don't send it, he'll be in pain all night. My hand tightened around the phone. I pictured my pension paperwork in the filing cabinet. The paid-off house. The quiet future I'd built one shift at a time while everyone else treated stability like something to be mined. I'm going back to sleep, I said. Don't you dare. Call his real father, I said again. Good night. I ended the call. The house exhaled. The furnace clicked. Somewhere down the block, a plow scraped the street, slow and methodical. I slept. For the first time in years, I slept without guilt, sitting on my chest like a second heart. When I woke, sunlight cut through the blinds, harsh and clean. The smell of stale coffee drifted from the kitchen where the timer had gone off automatically, just like it always did. For 5 seconds, my mind was empty. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. Mr. Carter, a calm male voice said. This is Detective Aaron Mills. Your name came up in an incident report last night. The mug stopped halfway to my mouth. We're calling about a financial instrument opened under your identifying information. And in that moment, before he said another word, I understood something that changed everything. There had never been a hospital bill, only a test. And the second I'd failed to pay, the trap had snapped shut. The detective kept talking, but my kitchen had gone strangely quiet, like the room itself was holding its breath. We flagged a casino line of credit, he said. $58,000. Your name, your social security number. I didn't answer right away. Not because I didn't hear him, but because my mind was busy rearranging the last 10 years of my life into something that finally made sense. I didn't open anything, I said at last. I understand, he replied, calm in the way men get when they've delivered this news before. That's why we're calling you. We need to ask a few questions, and we recommend you secure your financial accounts immediately. Is he hurt? I asked, surprising myself by caring. There was a pause. Paper shuffled. He has injuries consistent with an altercation. Non-life-threatening. He's being treated. The word treated landed differently now. And there are pending charges related to fraud and identity misuse. The detective continued. This may escalate to a federal review. The call ended politely. Professionally. Like a man clocking out of someone else's disaster. I stood there long enough for the coffee to go cold in my hand. So that was it. No hospital deposit, no emergency, just a carefully timed story designed to make me reach for my wallet before my brain had a chance to wake up. I set the mug down and opened my laptop at the kitchen table, the same table where we'd eaten dinner for 18 years, where I'd signed birthday cards and insurance forms, and anything else she slid across the surface with a smile. I logged into the credit monitoring service I'd activated years ago after a coworker lost his retirement to a nephew who just needed help. Back then, I'd told my wife it was smart to be cautious. She'd laughed and said I worried too much. The screen loaded. 3 soft inquiries in the last month. 1 hard inquiry from a lender tied to a casino brand I didn't recognize. My chest tightened. This wasn't sudden. This was deliberate. I printed everything. The pages slid out warm, accusing. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I put on my jacket and drove. The diner sat just off the highway, a squat brick building that smelled like grease and burnt coffee and stubborn survival. The kind of place where men went after retirement to remember who they were before life downsized them. He was already there, same booth he'd claimed since before cell phones made everyone important. Work jacket, reading glasses, newspaper folded like ritual. You look like hell, he said as I slid in. Morning to you too. I spread the papers between us. He didn't touch them at first, just studied my face. This about your wife's kid? He asked. I nodded. He picked up the pages, reading slow and methodical, the way he used to inspect safety reports back when we still believed rules could prevent damage. This wasn't sloppy, he said finally. This was planned. The words sank deep. Planned how? Soft pulls first, he said, tapping the paper. Checking limits. Then the big one. You don't do that unless you expect approval. My mind drifted to late nights. The glow of her phone in the dark. The way she angled the screen away when I walked past. He couldn't have done this alone, my friend said. The diner noise faded. Who has access to your documents? He asked. I didn't answer immediately. My wife, I said. He didn't look surprised. Then listen carefully, he said. You don't confront anyone yet. You protect yourself. Protect how? You freeze accounts, pull full reports, document everything, and you don't let guilt make decisions for you. Guilt. That word sat between us like an old enemy. My phone buzzed on the table. Her name, then a text, then another. Please call me. This is serious. They're saying things that aren't true. I turned the phone face down. He nodded once. Good. I drove home slower than usual, giving my thoughts room to stretch. The house looked the same from the outside. Plain, quiet, paid off. The kind of place people assume nothing bad ever happens. Inside, I opened the filing cabinet. Everything was neat. Insurance policies, tax returns, medical statements, all labeled in her handwriting. Behind the homeowner's policy, I found an envelope I didn't recognize. Inside were copies of my driver's license, my social security card, and a pre-approval letter dated 3 weeks earlier. My knees went weak. That's when my phone rang again. Different number. This is Special Agent Collins, a woman said, her voice tired but kind. We need to schedule an interview. About what? I asked, though I already knew. About protecting you, she said, and understanding who believed using your name was safe. Safe. I sat at the table until the furnace kicked on again, the sound filling the house like a warning bell. She came home around 7. Snow melted off her boots. Her cheeks were flushed like she'd been crying or yelling or both. He's stable, she said too quickly. They finally got him comfortable. I nodded. Good. She waited for more. When nothing came, she filled the silence herself. The police are overreacting, she said. Casinos do this all the time. He signed paperwork he didn't understand. I kept my eyes on the television. You're acting strange, she said. Am I? You didn't even ask how bad he's hurt. He's alive, I said. That's what matters. She nodded slowly, like she'd won a point. So we need to be united right now. United. That word used to mean something. She went to bed early. I stayed up with a yellow legal pad, writing dates and amounts and connections the way I'd done my entire career. Patterns emerged. Not one big theft. A drip. Cards opened and closed, transfers just under alert thresholds, refunds rerouted and emptied within hours. I traced one account. Her maiden name was on it. My hand didn't shake. Inspectors don't panic, they measure. Around midnight, I found something that made me laugh once short and hollow. His occupation listed on a credit application. Consultant. I leaned back and stared at the ceiling. A memory surfaced without permission. Him at 16, white-knuckled behind the wheel in an empty parking lot. Easy, I'd said. You don't fight the car, you guide it. He stalled, cursed, laughed, then rolled forward smooth as glass. She'd clapped like he'd won a race. I'd been proud. The next morning, I froze every account I could reach. Quietly. No speeches. Just phone calls made from the garage, where the smell of oil and cold metal kept me steady. When I walked back inside, she was standing in the kitchen, phone clutched like it weighed something. What did you do? She asked. Protected myself, I said. Her eyes flicked fear, then anger. You're punishing us, she said. No, I replied. I stopped helping hide it. That night, she cried. Real tears. Or convincing ones. I'm scared, she said. I feel like you're abandoning us. I'm not abandoning anyone, I said. I'm stepping out of the way. She looked up sharply. You don't know the whole story. I know enough. She reached for my hand. You've always been the safer name. The words fell into the room and shattered something permanent. I didn't raise my voice, didn't ask her to repeat it. I just nodded, like a man who finally understood exactly where the fault line was and why the house had been cracking for years. After she said it the truth slipped out naked and irreversible. The house felt smaller, not quieter, smaller. Like the walls had leaned in just enough to listen. She knew what she'd admitted the second the words left her mouth. Her eyes widened, then darted away, already searching for a way to rewind time. But there are some sentences you don't get to take back. Some truths don't care about intent. I stood up and grabbed my jacket. "I'm going for a drive," I said. She didn't stop me. She didn't follow. She sat there at the table, hands wrapped around a mug she hadn't touched, staring at the place where the safer name had finally stopped answering. Outside, the night was sharp and clean. I drove past warehouses that had outlived the companies inside them, past a VFW hall with a faded flag that still got raised every morning out of habit, past streets where nothing dramatic ever happened, which was exactly why I'd chosen them. The radio murmured farm reports and an ad for replacement windows. Normal sounds, anchors. I parked near the river and shut the engine off. The silence pressed in, but this time it didn't accuse me. It waited. I turned on the voice recorder on my phone, not to trap her, to remember. Because when truth finally shows itself, it does so quietly. And I knew if I didn't capture it, guilt would come later and try to rewrite history. Over the next week, I became boring on purpose. Work, diner, home. No confrontations, no accusations, no speeches about betrayal or vows, just observation. That's how you survive things like this, not by exploding, but by becoming uninteresting. She changed. That's how you know someone is scared. Not when they get loud, but when they get careful. She cooked dinners I hadn't asked for, touched my arm when she passed, like muscle memory trying to resurrect a habit, left old movies playing softly on the TV, the ones she knew I liked from before life turned into management. It all felt rehearsed, like watching someone follow instructions they didn't write. I played my part, ate the food, nodded at the right moments, slept on my side of the bed. Inside, I was locking doors. I pulled full credit reports from every bureau, printed bank statements going back years, cross-referenced dates with casino transactions, refund deposits, late-night transfers. Patterns don't lie. What I saw wasn't panic. It was structure. This wasn't a desperate mother scrambling to save her son. This was a system small enough to avoid alarms, steady enough to grow unnoticed. Refunds redirected, limits tested. Credit instruments rotated like spare tires. I brought everything to my friend one afternoon. We spread it across the dining table like a crime scene. "She knows exactly what she's doing," he said after a long silence. Medical billing teaches you how to sound urgent without being specific. People hear deposit and stop thinking. I thought about the call, the language, the clock she'd put on me. All night, right now. "This isn't just family drama," he said. "This is fraud. And if you don't separate yourself, you'll be standing next to them when it collapses." Separate. That word followed me home. 2 days later, I went to the credit union and asked to speak with a manager I'd known for years. She didn't ask why. She slid paperwork across the desk with the kind of efficiency that comes from seeing the same story too many times. "You wouldn't believe how often this happens," she said. I believed her. That afternoon, I filed for legal separation, not divorce. Separation gave me room, financial and legal, without lighting the house on fire while I was still inside it. She found the notice on the counter that evening. "What is this?" she asked, her voice smaller now. "Protection," I said. Her hands trembled. "You're ruining us." "No," I replied. "I'm refusing to help hide it." She stared at me like she'd never really seen me before. That night, my phone buzzed with a voicemail. His voice, slurred, angry. "You think you're better than us now? Mom said you'd pull this. You always do this when things get hard." I deleted it without listening again. Standing alone in the garage, staring at the tools I'd bought with honest money, something settled in my chest. This wasn't about revenge. It was about survival. And for the first time, I understood exactly what she'd meant. I wasn't her husband in this story. I was the anchor. The safer name they planned to drown with. The call from the federal office came 3 days later. They were calm, thorough, uninterested in drama. They wanted timelines, documents, facts. I gave them everything. The interview lasted hours. Not because they doubted me, but because they were building something methodical and heavy and irreversible. When it was over, I walked out into winter sunlight and realized my hands weren't shaking. That surprised me. I didn't feel victorious. I felt aligned. Weeks passed. The house became quieter in a different way, not tense, emptier. Conversations shrank to logistics. The past stopped volunteering its opinions. When the hearing date arrived, I went early. Habit. The building was beige and low-ceilinged and designed to drain emotion out of people before they ever sat down. Justice, I was learning, wasn't dramatic. It was procedural. She arrived late, hair perfect, eyes red enough to look convincing. He came in through a side door with his attorney, smaller than I remembered, softer around the edges. He didn't look at me. The prosecutor spoke first. Clean timeline, dates, amounts, signatures. Paper doesn't care about feelings. Then my name came up. I answered simply, honestly, without heat. When they played the recording, her voice, thin and unmistakable, the room went still. You've always been the safer name. No context, no explanation, just truth. She covered her mouth. The judge leaned back and sighed. And just like that, the story everyone had been telling themselves collapsed under its own weight. When it was over, I walked out alone. No cheering, no applause. Just the quiet relief of not carrying something that had never been mine to hold. The fallout didn't arrive all at once. It came in paperwork, sealed envelopes, carefully worded phone calls that never raised their voices. Consequences don't need to shout. They just show up and start rearranging your life. She moved into the spare room first. No argument, no announcement. Just a quiet migration of clothes and toiletries, like a tide pulling back before anyone notices the shoreline has changed. We spoke only when necessary. Logistics, schedules, who would be home when, which accounts were no longer shared. Every conversation felt like walking through a room after a fire, nothing actively burning, but everything permanently altered. He was ordered into treatment, mandatory, structured. The kind of help that only arrives when all the optional versions have been exhausted. I heard this secondhand, through channels that didn't ask for my opinion. I wished him well, and meant it. But wishing someone well doesn't require you to carry them anymore. She tried once more. It happened on a Sunday afternoon, sunlight pouring through the living room like it always had, as if the house hadn't noticed the shift. She sat across from me, hands folded carefully in her lap. I was scared, she said. I didn't recognize myself anymore. I waited. Fear makes people do things they don't mean, she added. I know, I said. She leaned forward. We can still fix this. Fix. That word used to own me. Some things aren't broken, I replied. They're finished. Her face tightened. So that's it? That's honesty, I said. It just arrived late. She cried then. Quietly. Not theatrically. Real tears this time. I didn't move. Not because I was cruel, but because I finally understood the difference between compassion and participation. The separation finalized without spectacle. No dramatic courtroom scene, just signatures and stamps and a timeline that officially confirmed what had already happened emotionally months earlier. I sold the house in early spring. A young couple bought it. First baby on the way. They loved the quiet street, the solid bones, the sense that nothing bad had ever happened there. I didn't correct them. I rented a small place near the water. One floor, no stairs, a porch that caught the morning light just right. The first night there, I slept with the window cracked and woke up to gulls instead of a phone vibrating with manufactured emergencies. Silence, it turns out, has weight, but it's the kind you can carry. Life didn't become exciting. It became precise. I cooked for myself. Simple meals, nothing that needed rescuing. I volunteered one morning a week at the Union Hall, helping men my age untangle paperwork they'd avoided: beneficiaries, pensions, access forms that quietly decide who can sign your name when you're not looking. You'd be surprised how many men don't know. The church stopped calling. So did most of the people who'd had opinions before they had facts. A few apologized later. I accepted without ceremony. One afternoon, months after everything settled, a letter arrived. Handwritten. I recognized the slant immediately. She said she was sorry. Said she never intended for it to go that far. Said she was learning who she was without panic driving every decision. I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. I didn't write back. Not out of anger. Out of completion. Some conversations don't need a response. They need a boundary. On quiet mornings, sitting on the porch with coffee warming my hands, I thought back to that night, the call, the demand, the moment I said no. I used to believe love meant never letting people fall. Now I know better. Love without limits isn't love. It's liability. There's a moment that comes after everything collapses, after the calls stop, after the paperwork settles, after the story everyone told themselves finally runs out of oxygen. It's not dramatic. It's quiet. It's the moment you wake up one morning and realize your chest doesn't feel tight anymore. No buzzing phone, no manufactured urgency, no voice on the other end telling you that if you don't act right now, someone you love will suffer. Just morning light and your own breath. And the strange realization that peace feels unfamiliar because you've spent so long confusing it with neglect. I didn't feel like a hero. I felt like a man who finally stopped carrying a weight that had never been his to lift. People like to ask questions after stories like this. They lean in and lower their voices, as if betrayal is contagious. Do you hate her? Do you regret staying so long? Would you do anything differently? The truth is simpler than people expect. I don't hate her. Hate takes energy, and I've learned to be careful where I spend mine. I don't regret loving people. Loving wasn't the mistake. Loving without boundaries was. For years I thought being dependable meant being available at any cost. That being a good man meant absorbing chaos so other people didn't have to. I thought sacrifice was proof of character. What no one tells you is that endless sacrifice doesn't make you noble. It makes you useful. And usefulness is a dangerous thing to be when the wrong people are watching. I've replayed that night in my head more times than I can count. The exact second when my thumb hovered over the screen. The second where muscle memory begged me to comply. If I had sent the money, the story would have ended very differently. Not with gratitude, with expectation. There would have been another call, another emergency, another reason why this time was different and this time really mattered. That's how these stories go. Not in explosions, but in installments. What saved me wasn't courage. It was exhaustion. The kind of exhaustion that finally asks a question louder than guilt. What happens if I stop? The answer surprised me. The world didn't end. No one died. The people who depended on my silence got angry. The people who benefited from my compliance got scared. And the people who mattered, the ones who respected boundaries, understood without needing an explanation. My life got smaller after that, and better. I stopped trying to be the solution to problems I didn't create. I stopped volunteering my stability as collateral for other people's chaos. I stopped mistaking urgency for truth. I learned that saying no doesn't make you cruel. It makes you honest. Some nights, sitting on the porch with the lake wind cutting clean across the water, I think about how close I came to losing everything I worked decades to build. Not to a stranger, but to love without limits. That's the part no one warns you about. The most dangerous traps aren't set by enemies. They're set by people who know exactly how good you are and how hard it is for you to disappoint them. If you're listening to this and something in your chest feels tight, let me say this plainly. If someone only reaches for you when they need saving, they don't see you as a partner. They see you as a resource. And resources are meant to be used. You are allowed to stop. You are allowed to protect what you earned. You are allowed to draw a line without explaining it to people who benefit from you not having one. You are allowed to sleep through the night. This isn't a story about revenge. Revenge would have required anger. This was about survival. About waking up one day and realizing the only person I was ever responsible for carrying was myself. So I'll leave you with this not as advice, but as a question worth sitting with. If the phone rang tonight, if the voice on the other end asked for everything right now, would you answer the same way you always have? Type 1 if you believe family should always come first, no matter the cost. Type 0 if you believe boundaries matter more than blood. No judgment, just truth. And if this story felt familiar, if you've ever been treated like a wallet instead of a partner, if you've ever been told your worth was measured by how much you could fix, then you're not alone. There are more stories like this. Stories about choosing dignity over guilt, clarity over chaos, silence over manipulation. If you want to hear them, you know where to stay. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't fighting back. Sometimes it's hanging up the phone.